I crawled back from the terminal void in the gut of the Samudaya, waking to a world of sterile chrome and the sharp, chemical tang of recycled breath. The first image to stitch itself into my optics was his face, a landscape of jagged tectonic shifts and hard-earned scar tissue, yet anchored by eyes that held a depth of dark, oceanic sorrow I had never seen in any lineage. They call themselves humans, these bipeds of soft clay and iron will, and I was a fool to think I knew their measure. Lieutenant Malik El-Amin did not merely save my sleeve. He rewrote the code of my existence when the rest of the galaxy had marked my file for deletion. But the end is a liar. Let us look to the wet, red beginning. I am Talari Vane, once a blade in the Zyrathi hegemony guard, stationed on the dust-choked rock of Obsidian Prime. We were there to hoard the glittering wealth of the earth, a dull vigil in a graveyard of silence, until the Skarax descended, a swarm of chitin and cold, clicking hunger that turned the silence into a scream. The Skarax came not as soldiers, but as a harvest. I watched the hegemony's finest torn like wet parchment, their armor no more than a suggestion against the razor-sharp geometry of the swarm's talons. I tasted the copper of my own failure as I crouched behind the heavy iron of mining rigs, my hands trembling with the ancient, lizard-brain terror that no Zyrathi training could ever fully purge. Every pulse from my rifle was a guttering candle against a hurricane of obsidian carapaces. Then came the cold kiss of the Reaper. A Skarax blade unzipped my abdomen, and the world dissolved into a hot, green slurry of my own lifeblood. As my consciousness frayed at the edges, I saw fire raining from the heavens, a sudden, blinding judgment cast by ships that looked like falling cathedrals. I fell into the dark, a nameless casualty of the meat grinder, never expecting to wake. But the universe is a cruel jester, and it was not finished with my suffering yet. I surged back into the light with a scream that died in a dry throat, my fingers clawing for a wound that was no longer a jagged hole, but a masterpiece of synthetic repair. The room was a symphony of gray alloys and the rhythmic heartbeat of medical monitors. "Hold fast, soldier," a voice rumbled, a deep, resonant bass that felt like stones grinding in a riverbed. "You're in the hands of the Sol Union now. I'm Malik El-Amin, and you're breathing the air of the NSV Samudaya." I tried to weave words out of the grit in my mouth, but he was already there, pressing a cylinder of cool, oxygenated fluid to my lips. "Drink. Slowly. You've been through the thresher." I croaked out a plea for the status of my world, my unit, the brothers I had left in the mud. He looked at me then, and I saw the shadow of the grave in his gaze. "The Skarax took the rock," he said. "We pulled you and a few lucky souls from the wreckage before we turned the site into a glass floor. Rest now. Your war is over. Your healing has begun." The days that followed were a blurred montage of clinical precision and the slow, agonizing reconstruction of my physical form. The human surgeons worked with a frantic, almost religious devotion to the flesh, using dermal weavers and cellular catalysts that made Zyrathi medicine look like tribal butchery. They promised I would be combat-ready in a fortnight, a resurrection of the meat I hadn't asked for. I watched them from my cot, the crew of the Samudaya, a Sol Union vessel tied to the Orbis Federation's relief vanguard. They were the new blood in the void, a species that treated every life as a holy relic while wielding the fire of suns. Malik was my constant shadow, a sentinel of dark skin and quiet strength. He brought me sustenance that didn't poison my Zyrathi chemistry and spoke of the human spirit in rhythms that sounded like poetry written in blood. He sat in the silence with me, an anchor in the storm of my displacement, listening as I mourned a home I would never see again. Malik was a creature of the Federation peacekeepers, a man who had traded his youth for the burden of the chrome and the gun. He spoke of his tours not with the hollow bravado of a Zyrathi officer, but with the heavy, rhythmic cadence of a man who counts his ghosts every night. "Why?" I asked him once, the question burning like acid. "Why bleed for a species you've never broken bread with? Why throw your sons into the fire for a handful of alien dust?" He leaned back, his silhouette etched against the cold light of the medbay. "Because the dark is vast, Talari, and it is hungry. We learned on Earth, through centuries of self-inflicted slaughter, that we are either one another's keepers or we are all just meat for the void. We have to be the light, even if it burns the hands that hold the torch. To turn away is to admit that the Skarax are right, that there is nothing but the hunger. As the ship's chronometers marked the passage of weeks, my frame grew heavy with new muscle and the phantom itch of scar tissue. Malik and I forged a bond in the quiet hours, a bridge built of shared trauma and the heavy truths of the soldier's life. He painted Earth for me in words that tasted of salt and ancient stone, towering peaks and oceans that held the weight of the world. In return, I gave him Zalo's 9, my moon of violet mists and the humid, heavy scent of the jungle after a storm. We spoke of purpose, that elusive ghost we all chase through the mud of our service. His eyes would soften when he mentioned Amora, his daughter waiting in the red dust of the Mars colony. I do this so she never has to know the weight of a rifle, he told me. I looked at him and saw the tragedy of the human. They fight for a peace they are too broken to ever truly inhabit. I began to wonder if there was a life beyond the blade, or if we were both just weapons waiting to be blunted. Strength returned, and with it, the permission to walk the steel arteries of the Samudaya. Malik walked a step behind, a silent guardian. The ship was a marvel of function and fellowship, a hive of activity where the rigid castes of my people were replaced by a fluid, chaotic camaraderie. I saw the Volthari, the Talari, and the mycoid savants working alongside the humans, their differences not ignored, but integrated into a single, functioning organism. It was a vision of a future that the Zyrathi hegemony would call a weakness, yet here it was, thriving in the cold heart of the vacuum. But the doubt remained a cold stone in my gut. My unit was a memory. My station was a tomb. Where does a void stalker go when the void has swallowed her world? Could I truly return to the Zyrathi, to a society that viewed my survival as an inefficiency, a broken gear in a machine that only knew the language of the conquest? One evening, under the artificial stars of the hydroponic gardens, I let the mask slip. The scent of alien flora was a thick, intoxicating perfume that failed to mask the rot of my own uncertainty. I am a ghost, Malik, I confessed, my voice a jagged edge in the quiet. You've mended the meat, but the soul is still in pieces on Obsidian Prime. I have no north, no command, no cause. How do I walk forward when the floor has fallen away? Malik did not offer empty platitudes. He took my hand, his grip a warm, solid reality against my trembling. Obsidian Prime is still screaming, Talari. The Skarax left a graveyard, and the Federation is going back to pull the living from the dirt. They need healers, they need builders, and they need people who know the terrain of that hell. He looked at me, and I saw the challenge in his eyes. The Samudaya is a warship, yes, but her heart is the relief. We go where the light has gone out. I think you should come with us. I stared at him, the logic of his offer fighting the old, Zyrathi instincts that demanded I flee the sight of my shame. I am a broken soldier, Malik. What can I give to a people who have already lost everything? He smiled then, a slow, dangerous expression that held more truth than any sermon. You are a survivor. You have walked through the fire and come out the other side. You know their pain because it is etched into your own hide. You have Zyrathi steel in your spine and a perspective we lack. Don't hide in the shadow of your scars, Talari. Use them to guide the others. He was offering me more than a mission. He was offering me a reason to remain in this sleeve. I looked into his dark eyes and saw a reflection of a self I didn't hate. Very well, I whispered, the words of vow. Let us go back to the ruins. Let us see if we can find the light in the ash. The descent to Obsidian Prime was a plunge into a nightmare reawakened. The planet was a charred husk, a testament to the Skarax's absolute lack of mercy. Where there had been thriving mining hubs, there was now only the twisted metal of industrial skeletons and the black, vitrified soil where the Samudaya's orbital batteries had answered the swarm. I felt the old terror clawing at my throat as we stepped onto the ramp, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and ancient death. But Malik was there, a pillar of iron at my side. Eyes up, Vane, he said, his voice a steadying hand on my shoulder. The dead are gone. We're here for the ones still breathing. We moved toward the field hospital, a cluster of pressurized tents that looked like white blisters on the scarred skin of the world. Inside, The air was thick with the sounds of the dying and the frantic, rhythmic motion of the medical teams. I found them in a corner of the main ward, a huddle of Zyrathi survivors, their eyes hollowed out by the horror they had witnessed. I was a vision of their own nightmares, clad in the grey fatigues of the Federation, a traitor or a savior depending on the tilt of their heads. "Peace," I said, using the formal, melodic Zyrathi standard that felt like a relic of another life. "I am Talari Vane, once of the Voidstalker cadre. I have returned with the Soul Union. We are here to keep you in your sleeves." A young miner, his arm a mangled mess of black chitin and raw flesh, spat at the floor. "The turn? Why would the bipeds bleed for us? We were nothing to them before the Skarax turned this rock into a pyre." Malik didn't wait for a translation. He knelt in the dirt, his med pack open, and held out a vial of iridescent Zyrathi catalyst. "We're here because the pain is the same in every language," he said, the translator on his neck turning his gravelly voice into a perfect Zyrathi command. "We don't need a reason to mend what is broken." The miner's defiance flickered and died as the pain reasserted its claim. He allowed Malik to take his arm, his eyes widening as the human's hands moved with the practiced grace of a master weaver. I watched as the others followed suit, the wall of their suspicion crumbling under the sheer, undeniable weight of Malik's compassion. 4 days, we moved through the wreckage like twin ghosts. Malik was the hand that mended the flesh. I was the voice that navigated the trauma. We found survivors in the deep shafts, half-mad with thirst and the sound of clicking in the dark. We helped bury the dead, the Zyrathi chants for the fallen mingling with the silent, stoic prayers of the Federation teams. We distributed the rations from the Samudaya, ensuring the Zyrathi biology was respected, turning the tide of starvation one soul at a time. I saw the change in my people, the slow, rhythmic dawning of hope in a world that had been promised only darkness. It was a metamorphosis of the spirit. I realized then that the Federation's true power was not in their railguns or their shielding, but in their refusal to accept the cruelty of the universe as an absolute. But the weight of the work began to take its toll. One dawn, after a grueling night spent watching a Zyrathi child slip away into the final dark, I found Malik on the edge of the camp. He was a silhouette of exhaustion, his head bowed against the weight of the world. "Malik," I said, my voice a soft echo in the morning mist. "You've given enough for one night. Come inside." He looked up, and I saw the toll the ghosts were taking. "I keep thinking about the ones we missed, Talari. The ones who died in the dark while we were light years away." I sat beside him, the cold ground a reminder of our shared mortality. "We are not gods, Malik. We are just soldiers. We saved the ones we could reach. You taught me that the light doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be there." He let out a long, weary breath, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. "You're right. I suppose I've spent too long looking at the shadows." He managed a ghost of a smile, a flicker of the man I had come to depend on. "Amora always tells me I'm too hard on the meat. She's got a point." I bumped my shoulder against his, a gesture of camaraderie that felt more intimate than 1,000 Zyrathi salutes. "She sounds like she has her father's wisdom and none of his stubbornness." Malik laughed, a short, dry sound that broke the gloom. "Brat. You're becoming too human for your own good, Vane." We sat in silence for a while, watching the twin moons of Obsidian Prime fade into the pale light of the rising sun. The camp was beginning to stir, the rhythmic sounds of survival a testament to the work we had done. The bond between us was no longer just professional. It was a fusion of two souls who had found a reason to endure in the wreckage of the galaxy. The mission drew to its inevitable close. The camp was stabilized, the survivors prepared for the long journey to the Zyrathi hubs or the Federation's sanctuary worlds. Malik stood on the observation deck of the Samudaya, his gaze fixed on the receding planet. "What's next for you, Talari?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of the usual command. "The hegemony is waiting for your report. But the Federation is waiting for your answer." I felt the uncertainty return, a phantom limb that still throbbed with pain. "Zalos 9 is a memory, Malik. The hegemony is a machine that has no place for a scout who has seen the warmth of the turn." I cannot go back to being a blade in a cold hand. I looked at him, and the words I had been hoarding finally forced their way out. I want to stay. I want to be part of the Samudaya. Not as a guest, not as a refugee, but as a peacekeeper. If the Orbis Federation will have me. Malik turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that wasn't duty in his gaze. You've already done the work, Vane. You've shown more resilience and soul than half the recruits I've trained. The Samudaya needs your edge, and I. He trailed off, the heavy silence of the deck filling with the things we hadn't said. I would count it a privilege to have you on my wing. I felt a sudden, sharp surge of purpose, a grounding of the soul that made the scars on my body feel like medals. Then it settled. I said, my voice firm. I will sign the articles. I will wear the grey. I will be the light. I reached out and took his hand, our fingers intertwining in a gesture that transcended species and service. We were two survivors who had found a home in the one place the Skarax couldn't reach, each other. The transformation was complete. I was no longer a void stalker of the hegemony. I was Talari Vane of the Orbis Federation. The days became a blur of training and integration. The grueling demands of the peacekeepers a welcome distraction from the ghosts of my past. Malik was my mentor and my constant companion, guiding me through the labyrinth of human custom and the technical complexities of their gear. I found a place among the crew, my unique physiology and Zyrathi combat training becoming an asset to the tactical teams. We were a diverse, chaotic family, bound together by the mission and the shared conviction that the void was not our master. And through it all, Malik was the center of my world, the man who had pulled me from the ash and shown me that the meat was more than just a vessel for pain. It was a vessel for connection. Upon my official induction, I was granted a bunk in the tactical wing and began the deep dive into the Federation's combat protocols. Malik was a hard taskmaster, his expectations as high as the atmospheric pressure on a gas giant. Don't expect the turn to go easy on you just because you've got scales, Vane, he'd say during our sparring sessions, his dark eyes gleaming with a fierce, competitive joy. I'd answer with a Zyrathi strike that would have broken a lesser man, and he'd catch it with a laugh that echoed through the gym. I'm a scout, Malik. I don't know the meaning of easy. We were a rhythmic dance of violence and respect, a calibration of our bodies and our wills. I found that I thrived under the pressure, the structure of the Federation giving me a sense of belonging that the hegemony's cold discipline never had. I was valued, not as a tool, but as a person. The ship's specialists sought me out, eager to bridge the gap between our technologies. Kalotun, the Volthari engineer with his many-jointed limbs and eyes like emeralds, spent hours with me modifying the Samudaya's shield harmonics to better reflect the Skarax's high-frequency plasma. Zyrathi, the Talari navigator, walked me through the poetic mathematics of the voidfold, fascinated by the intuitive way the Zyrathi navigated the slipstream. And in the medbay, I worked with the mycoid savants, translating the nuances of Zyrathi pain and healing into the Federation's database. It was a fusion of intellect and instinct, a collective effort that made us all more than the sum of our parts. Malik watched from the sidelines, a proud, stoic witness to my integration. We had become a unit, a specialized cell within the larger organism of the ship, our bond the steel core that held it all together. But it was in the quiet moments that the real work was done. One night, as we watched a nebula bleed purple and gold across the observation deck's viewscreen, Malik spoke of Amora again. She's growing up in a world of red dust and recycled water, dreaming of the stars, he said, his voice thick with a father's longing. She'd be fascinated by you, Talari, a Zyrathi warrior who chose the light. You'd be a hero in her eyes. I looked down at my hands, the dark scars a reminder of all I had lost and all I had gained. I would be honored to meet her, I whispered. If she can handle an alien who hasn't quite mastered the human habit of smiling at everything. Malik laughed and pulled me closer, the warmth of his body a solid, grounding presence. She'd handle you just fine. We both would. The word we hung in the air, a promise of a future that felt dangerously, beautifully real. Malik, I said, my voice barely a tremor in the silence. Is that what we are? Are we? He didn't answer with words. He reached out and cupped my face, his thumb brushing over the scales of my cheek with a tenderness that made my breath hitch. "I didn't seek this, Talari," he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "I thought my heart was a closed file, buried under the weight of too many ghosts. But you've rewritten the code. You are essential to my survival." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, rhythmic drumbeat. "I want this," I breathed. "I want you. Whatever the void throws at us." He made a low, guttural sound, and then his mouth was on mine. A hot, visceral collision of two souls finally finding their anchor. The kiss was a testament to our survival, a claim laid upon the meat and the spirit, a fusion of two disparate species into a single, unified purpose. The moment was shattered by the rhythmic, insistent chirp of Malik's comms. We broke apart, breathless and reeling, the cold reality of the service asserting itself once more. "El-Amin here," Malik answered, his voice regaining its gravelly, professional edge even as his hand stayed firmly on my waist. Captain Zhong's voice crackled through the link, sharp, precise, and heavy with the weight of command. "Malik, we've got a civilian freighter under fire near the Shroud Nebula Ring. Skarax raiders. I need your team in the hangar 5 minutes ago." Malik and I shared a look, a silent communication of adrenaline and shared intent. "Understood, Captain. Vane and I are on our way." As we sprinted toward the hangar, my gear heavy on my shoulders, I felt a fierce, savage joy. We were the light in the darkness, the shield against the swarm. We were Malik and Talari, peacekeepers of the Soul Union, and as long as our sleeves held, the void would find no purchase here. I was home,